Mark, you said you'd want to use every day as a spiritual practice, but what do you mean?
Well, that's what I'm going to explain today. Think about spiritual practice. There's really two ways of going about this. Number one is you isolate yourself from the world and you go try to find your true self, or you strip away the things that are false to find your true self. And so we're not going to go get away from the world today. We're going to confront this right in our everyday lives and see if magically we aren't putting ourselves in circumstances to do spiritual practice on a day-to-day basis without actually really realizing it.
Yeah, right here, right now.
And so, and there's kind of a catch here, and I'm going to share this with you in a few minutes, where we can fall into our own ego defenses with spiritual practice, and this avoids that. So,
yeah, important.
All right. So welcome to Mastering Thought, where we have Christine Black. Christina, you are a practitioner of, and say it?
I do craniosacral therapy, and I've been a massage therapist for 19 years.
19 years. So you started when you were 10 years old.
We got some child labor laws revised in my area and really progressive stuff. And
anyway, I'm Dr. Mark Waller. I've been a marriage family therapist for 25 years. And Mastering Thought is about talking about the mind, marriage, and mental health. And today we're talking about spiritual practice. So what is spiritual practice? Spiritual practice is self-realization, understanding one's true nature, and gaining insight into the self beyond the ego. Mm-hmm. And I think anybody interested in spiritual practice kind of understands that. It also involves discovering inner peace, awareness, presence, the expression of the divine, and personal growth. Mm-hmm. How does that sum that up?
Pretty darn good.
Okay, so, all right, so what we're going to do is we're going to use spiritual practice as our everyday experiences means stripping away the unreal, the inauthentic, and the drama to realize the self. The real you has always been there. We're just busy doing something else. Mm-hmm. As opposed to, selling our belongings and going to Tibet and living in a hut for, the next 20 years.
Right.
And the theory being that is it possible, would you consider this, that life is giving us circumstances and decisions and emotional reactions that we can be looking at every day that's just as effective as, going the other way for spiritual practice. Mm-hmm. Okay.
Sounds like it will maybe take some more determination at the beginning, don't you think?
It's a kind of a different orientation for sure.
Yeah, Anyway, let's keep going.
So I want to introduce you to this gentleman. His name is Jack Kornfield. And this is a pretty good selling book that he wrote, 20 years ago, called A Path with Heart. And Kornfield is very well known for meditation and spiritual practice. And you can see the subtitle here as A Guide Through the Perils and Promises of Spiritual Life. Mm-hmm. And so this book starts out very surprising, and I want to share it with you. So he says in the book A Path with Heart, I returned to America after years of monastic training and spiritual practice in the East. Now, what does this mean? This means monastic means he lived basically in a monastery.
Mm-hmm. You think he had like the bright orange, like
I'm sure he did.
Monk robe? Okay.
And, I mean, the implication here is he slept on a stone floor and ate water, rice, and drank water. I mean, that's it.
Wow.
I don't know if that's literally true, but that's what monastic means.
Okay.
And so he turned to America expecting to find a peaceful and enlightened life. And surprisingly, instead, I encountered my own unfinished business.
Hmm.
Isn't that interesting? Despite my many hours of meditation. And I believe he was overseas for 19 years.
Wow.
And he says, I had trouble with relationships, with intimacy, and with love.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my gosh.
How disappointing.
Well, yeah, I mean, can you imagine you spent 19 years and all that sacrifice and all that meditating
Yeah.
only to discover you didn't handle your shit, basically.
Mm-hmm. I'm where I was before.
In a big sense. So he says
Yeah.
it became clear that I had to integrate my spiritual practice with the complexities of modern Western life. This meant bringing the teachings of mindfulness and compassion into my relationships. Who'd have thought, right? My
Mm-hmm.
work and everyday living.
Mm-hmm.
And I think what he did, I'll have to go back and remind myself, I think he went back to school in psychology and got a PhD because he really wanted to understand this thing that was going on.
Mm-hmm.
And then he says spiritual practice must be joined with psychological work and emotional healing. Without addressing the wounds and patterns of our psychological life, our spiritual practice can remain shallow and incomplete.
Mm-hmm.
That is a mouthful.
I do see it on my table, though. I do see it when I'm working on people that those things all hold hands.
Okay, tell me a little more about that.
Okay, so I have like an example. I had probably a woman who is a widow at the age of 35, and it's been about a year. And as she was getting worked on, she sort of receded to this state where her authentic self was able to like rise up this message that like, yes, it's sad my husband's gone, but life can still be beautiful was the bigger takeaway from that moment. And so she went there and she said, yeah, I am sad my husband died. Yeah, it has been different for myself and the kids ever since. And it's not over yet. And there's this other person who really cares about me. And my kids are happier with him. And maybe I am ready to let go of that, turn the page. Maybe I am ready to see that life will be beautiful for me again. And after that session, her friend reached out to me, who was the reason she met me anyway, and had said that she really attributed being in that session, being in that state, coming to that conclusion really healed her heart, and she was able to move in with her boyfriend, and things had been going really well for her.
Okay,
So yeah, it was like a nice life changing moment for her because all those things took place together.
so one of the rules we're going to talk about today addresses exactly that situation.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, let's see the last thing Kornfield says here. He says a genuine spiritual life requires more than a retreat from the world. Isn't
Mm-hmm.
that interesting? Now, let me ask you a question. And this is for the audience that's familiar with the lion and the unicorn model, and for you, Christina. Which type, a lion or a unicorn, would be more likely to retreat from the world?
Well, a unicorn for sure.
Right? That's why
Yeah.
those kind of spiritual practices appeal to the unicorn personality so much, because that
Mm-hmm.
that is their psychological that's their psychological defense. They
Right.
retreat from the world. They just retreat. They avoid. They go
Yeah.
away.
Yeah.
So it's very appealing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay. It requires us to be engaged with life, to bring our practice into our relationships and work, and to cultivate a heart that can hold all aspects of our human experience.
Mm-hmm.
And so today we're going to talk about 3 rules that allow us to do just that. And now these are my categories. They're just pretty arbitrary, but they're what occurred to me that might be helpful.
Mm-hmm.
And so let's start with rule number 1, which is exactly what you were talking about a minute ago.
Mm-hmm.
So here are three rules for making every day a spiritual practice. Number 1 is to study circumstances. And so that's what your woman was doing on the table. She was studying her circumstance.
Yeah.
So from the perspective of spiritual practice, here's a very challenging perspective to take. We are not victims of circumstance. We are the architects of them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
What does that mean to you when I say that, Christina?
Well, I would say that, like, yeah, there are things that are going to happen outside of our control. Like, take the
Right.
the example of the widow, right? Unless she, I doubt she was her husband's demise. So, anyway, I'm just saying that she didn't control that death, but it happened. But she does control, like, a belief that she might hold that is, it can't ever be good again.
Right.
And that believing that would create a circumstance where she's stuck and she and her children can't move forward from grief, maybe. Is that
So
fair?
I think that's absolutely a good example. And what I've encountered, as a matter of fact, I've got somebody in my practice right now who lost her husband quite suddenly in a car accident about
Mm-hmm.
6 or 8 months ago. And I think one of the challenges for people that go through that circumstance is they're afraid to give themselves permission to move on
Mm-hmm.
because they think it's going to dishonor the loved one that they lost, and they feel
Mm.
guilty that they almost need to enshrine their grief in order to honor that person and not forget them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so that's a very difficult thing. That's a real thing that I think people go through when they experience those kind of losses.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
So we're not victims of circumstances, we are the architects of them. And here's some examples: health, loss, family, career, location, finances, marriage, divorce. And that's not all. That's just what came to mind when I was putting this together.
Right. Yeah.
But for instance, health. Let's say you have a health issue. Okay, it might seem insulting, but I wonder if you ask this question: what would I have to believe about myself to find myself in this circumstance? I wonder if we could go deeper into our true selves and find some truth there.
Mm-hmm.
Let's say, you have a family and you have a son or daughter that's into drugs. It's a bad circumstance.
Mm-hmm.
The question then is, what would I have to believe about myself to find myself in this circumstance? So is there something deeper we can see about the circumstance and ourselves?
Mm-hmm.
Now, you might say, well, my belief about myself didn't influence whether my son or daughter took drugs, but maybe the circumstance is bringing out another belief that's been there all along, and that this is encompassing that belief in some way. For
Like,
instance,
maybe like I can't be a strong enough influence on my kids or something. Like, I'm
you know,
helpless when it comes to influencing my kids or something like that.
that's exactly what was on my mind.
Yeah.
And the thing, I'll be more specific than that. What I run into all the time is women who say I'm not a good mother.
Mm.
So their belief is they're not a good mother, and the circumstance is telling them that. But if they ask themselves the question, what do I believe about myself? They would find that maybe there's a deeper insecurity or inferiority linked to this, or maybe a sense of failure.
Mm-hmm.
And when that's exposed, it might actually release them a little more from the circumstance.
Right. Right.
So yeah,
Yeah.
you and I were thinking exactly in parallel. Let's think
Mm-hmm.
of some other examples. Let's say career. So I'll give you an example of a client I had about 6 months ago. Very nice
Mhm.
gentleman, very smart, career, had a professional position in the medical field, but he was stuck, and people loved him and admired him, and they kept encouraging him to move on, but he wouldn't. He just would not take opportunities for advancement in his career.
Mhm.
And I kept trying to get him to ask this question: what do I have to believe? What would I have to believe about myself to find myself stuck in my career?
Mhm.
Well, in therapy, we found out what the answer was.
Mhm.
The answer was his parents immigrated from Mexico, and I don't know if you've known a lot of immigrants, but the work ethic is just this huge thing.
Phenomenal. Yeah. Phenomenal
And we're
work
coming
ethic.
to America and we're going to succeed at all costs. And part of the message that he got from his parents was not only you have to succeed, but you have to seek stability. And so in his mind, it was too risky for him to
Got it.
take any other job once he had solidified his position in his career.
Got it. Wow. Yeah.
And so it would have been to
Wow.
take the risk of, maybe moving ahead in his career, would have jeopardized that security, and he couldn't do that psychologically. It had him stuck.
Mhm. Mhm. It's so interesting. Yeah.
And so in his case, if he had asked this question, he would have had an aha moment where he saw that he was being constrained by this belief about himself that really was unnecessary and was just leftover programming from a very
Yeah.
understandable situation he grew up in.
Yeah.
So we can use circumstances to our advantage for spiritual practice.
Sorry.
checking,
My
checking
dog
on.
started making some very weird noises. I was like, what's happening over here? So let's get back. Sorry. We're getting back to circumstances. What would I have to
Oh.
believe about my dog to find her hacking? No, what does she need to believe about herself? Anyway, it doesn't matter. Okay.
All right, so
Well,
are we ready to move on from that? Go ahead.
yeah. Oh, I was just playing around with I might be trying to make it too complicated, so you tell me if you think that's true. And maybe you'll help our friends also not try to make it too complicated like I can. Um, so I've been told that one of my ego's tactics is that I help people as a way to take the attention off myself and that I don't have to pay attention to myself. So I'm just like thinking like, okay, I am in the service industry, so that kind of makes sense. But then also, I don't know. Anyway, and your question just got me thinking in a whole new
No,
way.
no, I think that fits perfectly into the framework that we're talking about here. So,
Mm-hmm.
so here would be the question to ask.
Oh, I got it. Okay, go ahead.
Go ahead, tell me what did you just get?
Like, why, what do I have to believe about myself to find myself in this circumstance? And maybe the answer is that other people's problems are more worth solving than my own. And so I backburnered me solving my own problems until about 4 years ago.
Okay. Well,
I don't
that was
know.
an
It
aha
does, it
moment.
does hit.
You just had a light bulb moment. So,
Yeah, no, it's definitely like I can see how I would put other people's needs before mine because like who cares about my needs? Just get
so,
over it.
or let me ask you a question. Let's embellish that a little bit.
Yeah,
Let's
yeah.
say let's say you learn to care for other people's needs over yourself in the hope that eventually they would see that and care about your needs too.
Oh, yeah. It is something I do. Dang, Mark. Things are getting real.
So So that's what's beautiful about what just happened is you just did exactly what the exercise is. You asked the
Mm-hmm.
question and you instantly got an answer.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's literally how amazing this is.
Yeah. 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 Yep.
So that was yet another example of you know, and yeah, it's just amazing to watch what happens to you. It's incredible.
Mm. Mm.
So
And I'll say too, I've had to pick up some tips for like reaching like more authentic answers if you see that you can get in your head about answering questions like this.
mhm.
So I'd be interested to see what you think about this, but like if you write that question with your writing hand and then try to answer it with your non-writing hand,
Right.
that can be like if it's a hard abstract exercise for your mind, that can be a way to get bypass some of that.
I think somebody wrote a book about that called Drawing on the Right Side of the Brain.
Uh
So, but something popped into my head, and I need your permission to share something you're struggling with.
yeah,
So
I
it's not
trust you.
horribly personal. So
I trust you. Go for it.
Christine is struggling a little bit trying to maintain her weight right now.
Oh, I know. So true.
And it just occurred to me that might fit into this pattern.
Oh.
Maybe it's more important for you to feed other people and to satisfy their hunger than it is for you to satisfy your own.
Hmm.
Because that's very similar to what you just said a minute ago.
Oh. Let's see.
So I wonder if the belief might be that you don't deserve to be satiated. You have to have other people be satiated.
Maybe so. I would say it's less about the actual eating of food because once I sit down, like I do try to like eat enough. I do try to
Okay.
eat variety. Do try to get full. But I would say the times that I would skip a meal is because I have too many things that I have to do for
Okay.
everybody else or something
Okay.
like that
Okay.
might
Okay.
actually be. So like other people's needs are too important for me to meet my own or something
That's
like
basically
that.
what I just said.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
exactly what I said.
Yeah.
Yeah. So just
Yeah, cuz
something to think about.
yeah. Interesting. Yeah.
So every time this topic comes up for you, just ask the question, what would I have to believe about myself to find myself, needing to gain weight?
Yeah.
I don't know, just something to consider.
Yeah.
Because
Although it's been working, I have been gaining weight. I'm very
good,
proud of
good, great.
that.
All right, let's move on to number two.
Let's do
Number
it.
two in the three rules for making every day a spiritual practice is to question decisions. And let's see what the spiritual perspective is for this. Decisions are not made, they are motivated.
Now, this kind of confused me at first when you said it. Can you define what you mean by that or paraphrase? They're not made, they're motivated.
So in other words, if I'm gonna spend the rest of my day in my gym working out, or I'm gonna spend the rest of the day surfing the web, I'm not actually making a decision. I'm being motivated one way or the other by some motivation that maybe I'm not seeing.
Right.
And maybe the motivation is working out in the gym is just too hard.
Mm-hmm.
I just don't want to put in the effort.
Yeah.
So let's go back to this. So here's some examples of decisions. What kind of job? I don't mean a career. I mean, why did I pick this job over the other job? Why do I pick these friends over other types of friends?
Mm-hmm.
Why did I pick my partner as opposed to a different kind of partner? This is very important because relationships are a spiritual practice.
Yeah,
And
right,
this is, you know, we're
right.
so used to blaming the other person. This is really hard. People will come to me all the time and they'll say, should I stay or should I leave? And my answer to that question is, have you learned what you're supposed to learn?
Mm.
And so, you know,
Hmm. Hmm.
for, for instance, let me give you another example. Let's say there's a couple that comes to see me, and
Mm-hmm.
he's a drunk and he's a womanizer and he's violent and he can't hold a job. And she's beautiful and loves Jesus and reads her Bible every day and is a very good person.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the question is, what motivated her to be in this relationship?
Mm-hmm.
And the typical answer is, well, I lost the lottery. I mean, I made a bad decision. I keep picking bad men.
Mm-hmm.
But that's not really the deal here, because what's happening is, if I was brutally honest, what actually motivated my decision to be with this kind of a person? And what does that say about me?
Mm-hmm.
Because number one, that reveals a deep truth about yourself. And number two, it prevents you from doing the same thing all over again.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
if I let this woman leave therapy without actually getting that answer, because she has a motivation to be in a relationship with somebody who's acting out like this all the time. What is it? Let's go look. Let's find it. Let's see what it
Mm-hmm.
is. Because that's
Mm-hmm.
part of the mix in the dynamic in the relationship.
Yeah. So it's like this line of questions is like, why did I pick this type of thing, person, place?
Right. It's not like, why did I make this huge mistake? It's,
Yeah.
well, what if I intentionally picked this kind of a person? Well, if I was brutally honest with myself, if I intentionally picked this person for reasons I don't understand, what would have motivated that decision?
Mm-hmm. Right. And maybe this person reminds them of someone that they had before and they just thought that's the standard, or maybe someone they lost, or like this could be like maybe answers for this type of question. Or
You're right on
or is
target.
it okay, or is it like maybe like relationships have to be hard and so then they just pick someone that they would get into a contentious relationship with or something.
I think it's a combination of the two things. See, we are addicted to the struggle of whatever the struggle is, but we also need to know what the struggle is. So
Yeah.
I'll give you another example. I've got this couple I'm working with. Um, they've been married for 30 years, and her complaint is he never pays any attention to her. He won't give her any affection. Um, he doesn't show up for the relationship, and it just drives her crazy. Okay,
Mhm.
now the question she needs to answer is, what motivated her decision to be in that type of relationship?
Mm.
Not why did she make such a bad decision, but what struggle is she addicted to that made her want to recruit somebody who would behave in this manner?
Mhm.
And the truth
Man.
that she discovers will unlock the whole cycle in the relationship.
Mhm. 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 Interesting.
So, consumption, time, why do we spend all our time doing certain things? What's motivating that? Are we avoiding something else? What about
I
morals and
wonder,
ethics?
yeah, I wonder about like motives that would be positive as well. Like, I don't know, I guess I'm just trying to not pigeonhole us into looking for certain kinds of answers. Like maybe an answer could be I believe people are worth standing beside as they like improve themselves or something like that. Like I almost just
Okay.
wonder if they're
So,
looking for an underdog to like, you know, or
okay.
whatever,
So
someone to be the rookie of the year.
my question to you then would be, what is it about you that you need to be a rescuer?
Mhm. Yeah. Great.
So
Yeah.
that has an analog somewhere.
Yeah.
and you know the bad news about this is, you know what motivates rescuing?
Needing to be rescued.
No.
Did I get it? Oh, dang. I was like, is
I
this
like
shadow work? Is this shadow work?
I like the way you're thinking. No, what motivates the rescuer is they can feel superior to the person they're rescuing.
Oh, yeah. So that's like in a Buddhist principle book I'm reading right now. And they're saying that, like, if you have to constantly save people so that you can feel good about yourself, then you think that you're not worth something unless you can fix people. So it's like a way for you to prove your own worth to yourself all the time.
So underneath our decisions are always motives like you're describing.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And, it's not good enough to say, well, I knew I'd wanted to be a doctor since I was young. That's not good enough. If you were brutally honest, what was the seed that was planted when you were young that made you become a doctor? And becoming
Yeah,
a
right.
doctor is a metaphor for something,
Right. An archetype of some kind.
right?
Yeah. Interesting. See?
All right.
It's getting spiritual. It's getting spiritual.
Well, but see, the purpose behind finding our true motives and why we're in circumstances is because that's covering up this true self.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We're busy working out all this unfinished business, as Kornfield says, instead of experiencing who we really are.
Yeah.
And so these are
Yeah.
questions that take us directly to the heart of what that is and where it's coming from.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, rule number 3 is to confront emotions and reactions. And by confront, I don't mean in an aggressive way. I mean in a way that you embrace these. It's like emotions and reactions are a phone ringing. But
Mm-hmm.
what are they a thin
Right.
disguise of? They're a thin disguise of whatever it is that's underneath the emotions and reactions.
Like if
And
something makes you mad, it makes you mad just like this other thing that makes you mad, and maybe that's like more of a core part, like of a core pain for you. Is that what you mean?
okay, you just said it. It's about pain.
Mm-hmm.
So emotions and reactions are always involved in pain,
Mm-hmm.
and pain takes us to a deeper level. And so here's the question. Here's some emotions: anger, fear, anxiety, jealousy, envy, sadness, guilt, shame, resentment, hatred, disgust. And so the
Mm-hmm.
question then to turn this into a spiritual practice is, what does this emotion reaction tell me about myself? See, it's easy to find out what it tells you about the other person. I don't like the other person. They're pissing me off.
Yeah.
But then the question is, what am I supposed to learn that I am not learning about myself?
Mm-hmm.
So it's easy to place blame, but to reverse it, there was a really well-known spiritual teacher named, oh my God, her name escapes me right now, Byron Katie.
Mm.
And she had a
What a
thing she
name.
did. It was kind of process she called the work. And let's say you came to me and you said, my husband doesn't love me enough. And in the work, I would say, your husband doesn't love you enough. Is that true? And, I would say, does your husband not love you enough, or are you thinking that he doesn't love you enough? And then what she would do is reverse it. And she would say, what if you don't love him enough? And so the idea here is, instead of looking at the other person, where your jealousy or your envy or your resentment is directed, just ask the question, what does it say about me that I'm feeling jealous or resentful? And what am I supposed
Mm-hmm.
to learn from feeling this feeling?
Mm-hmm.
And so I
Yeah,
really
like
think,
what exactly is making you feel insecure or something like that. And then,
well, you know what we say, it's when, when you're texting on your phone, I feel insecure. Well, the
hmm,
texting is just a trigger. Where does the insecurity actually come from?
yeah, right. Yeah.
So if
This,
you've got nicer clothes than I do and I'm envious of that, okay, if I ask myself, what am I supposed to learn from my envy of Christina about myself? And as we found a few minutes ago, when you ask these questions, you almost instantly get an answer.
yeah,
It's not even hidden most of the time.
right. You just have to find the real question.
You
And you
just
have
need to
given us
ask.
three. Yeah, yeah.
So here are the three things just to kind of summarize. Study the circumstances,
Hmm.
question the decisions,
Yeah, which types
and
of things? Uh-huh.
go ahead. Question the
Oh,
decisions.
yeah. Uh I was just saying that's the one where it was like, why did I choose this type of person or this type of job or this type of
Right,
whatever?
right.
Yeah.
Everything that appears in our everyday life is an opportunity for us to go deeper.
Mm-hmm.
Because
Yeah.
the last one is to confront emotions and reactions instead of trying to get away from them.
Mm-hmm. Right.
I mean, I wish I had $1 for every client in the last 25 years that said to me, I don't want to feel this way.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of saying, what does it tell me about myself that I do feel this way?
Right.
Because
Yeah.
basically they're on the run from their emotions and reactions.
Mm-hmm. Which is part of the ego, by the way.
Of course.
Yeah, it's
Right.
preventing you from really getting to that place of peace and acceptance and thriving.
And you really brought us full circle by saying that, because self-realization is understanding one's true nature and gaining insight into the self beyond the ego.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
And so these three questions, these three rules take you beyond the ego, because those rules are addressing things that are being created by the ego.
Mm-hmm. Right. Right. Which it's just doing, I mean, I think of the limbic system and the ego as being either like connected or the same thing. And it makes
Right,
sense that like this primitive part of your mind is just trying to get you to like, don't worry about so much stuff. Just like keep going. And so
right,
it's like it makes sense why it would be like you don't need to worry about why you're hurting. It would be so much work for you to get to the bottom of it and rewire your brain. Let's just keep
right.
accepting this pain and keep going. Whereas, like, you have this higher consciousness, this gift that's given to you, this piece of
Mm-hmm.
you that already knows what you need and it can help you, like, arrive where you need to go. And it's so cool to befriend that part of yourself, really. And just to, like, have a chance to get free of the limbic system. Because I mean, I know that I'm an animal, but I don't want to live animalistically. I want to be able to take advantage of this highest part of myself and be able to live in like the freedom of that while being very much aware that I am still a creature and that I'm just this weird mixture of both. And like that's okay. That's beautiful actually. How
So
exciting.
I really like the way you summed up the whole purpose of the discussion today, because that's it in a nutshell. And that brings us to the topic of staying with us as we have these discussions.
Yeah, please stick around. Please
Like
like
and
and
subscribe.
subscribe.
They tell me that if you don't ask, people won't do it. And
Mhm.
we're literally getting thousands of views on our videos. And we're really honored. Both
Yeah.
Christina and I are kind of somewhat flabbergasted and really honored
Yeah.
that these discussions are so so successful. So do like and subscribe because it kind of sustains us emotionally. It's positive
Yeah.
feedback.
Yeah, and send this video to some fellow journeyers. Like we do this better in community, and it's really great.
So,
Really great.
yeah, and by the way, if you would like to appear on one of these podcasts with us, that would be great to discuss some of these things. Also, if you have any questions or want any help, scan the QR code, and we will respond. And just another thing, I've written 3 books: The Dance, the Lion, and the Unicorn, which is all about relationships; Mastering the Thought, which is about the voice in your head; and Awakening. And the Dance, the Lion, and the Unicorn is available in an Audible book. But again, feel free to reach out in the comments or scan the QR code. It's a little form that you fill out and lets us know what you need, and we'll respond immediately. I find YouTube to be a little overwhelming, and sometimes I miss things for a few days and don't know people commented. So
Yeah, and thank you everybody who's been leaving such interesting comments. It makes it
yeah,
so fun.
it's been very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody said sayonara because they didn't like it. Unfortunately, they misspelled sayonara, so
Oh no.
I didn't want to embarrass them.
This is why I use Grammarly. And this should be, man, what a perfect time. Grammarly, you should sponsor us so that I can talk about you.
Christina's going through our slides today, correcting my grammar, which I really appreciate. Because I learned how to spell using Pahonics. Remember Pahonics?
Uh-huh. Mm-hmm.
It's the only word you can't spell using Pahonics. Phonics.
Phonics. That's funny.
Anything to say in wrap up, Christina?
I would just say, like an encouragement for friends out there trying this, that like this is an everyday practice. This is going to be one little thing at a time, and you might know exactly where you want to go, but it's so nice to like take a moment and appreciate the little victories. I can say I've been doing a lot of spiritual practice for about 4 years, and it's not like I'm some kind of master or anything, but I can say that when I slow down and go, wow, my head's a little clearer now after this understanding, like it all adds up. And I find that I'm able to be more present and more linear thinking as someone who has ADHD. That's really nice. And that I can show up as like a better version of myself most of the time, and I don't get super disappointed at myself when I act more like the animal side of myself, because I remember there's always next time.
So I just want to say in closing, you're making yourself available today in an authentic way. I mean, you had an aha experience. Your contribution is incalculable. It was
Thanks.
really, yeah, it was a lot of fun just to interact and see how this works in a real live way. So
Well,
it was great.
thanks for those questions, because I think those are very good questions. And if someone's making up their own questions throughout exploration, I think it's really wonderful when you can ask questions in a humble way, because the non-conscious and or what would you call it? What would you call the non-conscious inner wisdom?
Um, yeah, either way, non-conscious, inner wisdom, higher self.
Yeah, higher self. Yeah, yeah. Like your higher self is much more engaging when um, we're humble as we approach it. So I don't know.
Well,
Yeah,
and also when we just simply ask.
exactly. Yeah,
Most of the time we don't even ask. So
yeah. No, that's true. Yeah. What about you? Any other wrap up thoughts?
no, I think that'll do it. And I learned a lot putting this together. It kind of These are all things I do naturally when I work with people, but it forced me to put them in a framework that I had never seen before, so it was very helpful.
Mm, congealed in a new way.
That's correct.
That's fun. Good for you.
All right, everybody. Thanks
Oh,
so much for coming today.
yep. Great to have you.
See you next time. Bye bye.